I've always been careful when hiking alone. I tell people where I'm going, bring extra supplies, and keep my wits about me. But no amount of preparation can help when you run into something or someone you weren't meant to find. It happened 2 summers ago in northern Montana. I had planned a 3-day solo trek along an isolated section of trail deep in the forest. No cell service, no nearby towns, just wilderness. That was the appeal. The first day was uneventful. I hiked nearly 12 miles, set up camp near a small creek, and fell asleep to the sound of water trickling over rocks. The second day, things got strange. Around midday, I noticed something odd. Another set of boot prints on the trail. They were fresh, the edges still sharp in the dirt. That wouldn't have been weird on a popular trail, but I hadn't seen another soul since I started. By late afternoon, I had the uneasy feeling of being watched, the kind that prickles at your skin, makes you turn around, even when you know no one's there. I picked up my pace. About an hour later, I spotted something ahead on the trail. A small clearing with what looked like an old, tattered tent collapsed in the middle of it. It had been there a while, months, maybe even years. The fabric was torn, the poles snapped. A rusted pot sat nearby, half buried under leaves. Then I saw the knife, a hunting knife, sticking out of a tree stump. It looked clean. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding. Something about the scene felt wrong. I decided to keep moving. I hiked another 4 miles before setting up camp, making sure to go off trail, deeper into the trees. I didn't light a fire. I barely ate. Every sound felt louder. Every crack of a branch set my nerves on edge. Then, sometime past midnight, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, just outside my tent. I held my breath, gripping the small knife I kept in my pack. The footsteps stopped for a long time. Then came the sound of fabric rustling, someone brushing against my tent. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed completely still. Minutes passed. Then the footsteps started again, moving away this time, fading into the forest. I waited until dawn before unzipping my tent. There were footprints in the dirt, large, heavy, circling my campsite. I packed up and hiked out faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop, didn't rest. When I finally made it back to my car, I locked the doors and just sat there, shaking. I don't know who was out there. I don't know what they wanted. But I know one thing. Whoever it was, they hadn't been lost. They had been hunting. I've always loved being alone in nature. There's something about the silence of the wilderness, the rustling leaves, the distant call of an unseen bird. It calms me. Or at least, it used to. Last fall, I decided to challenge myself with a remote trail deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It wasn't on any official maps, just an old path I'd found through word of mouth, whispered about in online forums. The promise of untouched nature, the lack of tourists. It was too tempting to resist. The first few miles were exactly what I'd hoped for. Thick, towering trees enclosed the narrow path, golden leaves carpeting the ground beneath my boots. But as I pushed deeper into the woods, an uneasy feeling crept in. It started subtly, an odd silence when I should have heard birds and insects. Then, the deeper I went, the more I noticed how wrong the forest felt. The trees were off. Their bark was split in unnatural ways, like they had been clawed open. Strange, crude symbols were carved into some of them. I took pictures, thinking they were remnants of some old folklore, but the markings unsettled me. They didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. The sun dipped lower, and a deep, unnatural chill settled in. I knew I needed to set up camp soon. I found a small clearing, pitched my tent, and started a fire. The flickering light gave me a false sense of security until I noticed the footprints. They circled my campsite. I froze, my breath hitching. The prints weren't mine. They were barefoot, the impressions deep, as if whoever made them had been standing there for a long time, just watching. My heart pounded. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the trees, expecting to see something, someone lurking just beyond the firelight's reach. But there was nothing. I barely slept. Every snap of a twig, every rustling leaf made my skin crawl. And then, sometime in the dead of night, I heard it, a whisper. Not the wind, not an animal. A voice, low, rasping, too close. It said my name. I bolted upright, grabbing my knife. The fire had burned low, casting long, shifting shadows. The whisper came again, stretched and distorted, like it was being dragged through the trees. I didn't wait to find out who or what was out there. I grabbed my pack, doused the fire, and started moving back the way I came, my flashlight bouncing wildly with each step. I moved fast, too fast, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then I saw them. The trees ahead of me, the ones I was sure I had passed on my way in. They were different now. The carvings were deeper, fresh. And in one, just ahead, my name was etched into the bark. Panic surged through me. I turned, running blindly through the dark forest. The whispering followed, growing louder, a chorus of hissing voices repeating my name. I stumbled, nearly falling, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Then the trees parted, and I burst onto the main trail. My car was still there, untouched. I didn't question it. I jumped in, started the engine, and tore out of there, not daring to look back. I don't go alone anymore. Sometimes, though, in the dead of night, I still hear the whispers. And when I wake up, gasping, heart racing, I swear I can smell damp earth and decaying leaves, as if the forest is still calling me back. I should have listened to my gut. I had been hiking alone for years, taking pride in my ability to navigate the wild, to be self-sufficient in the silence of the deep woods. So, when I got the chance to house-sit my uncle's remote cabin in the Olympic Peninsula for a week, I jumped at it. I wanted the solitude, the kind that makes you feel like the last person on earth. The cabin sat miles from the nearest road, shrouded in dense firs and thick, rolling fog that clung to the hills like something alive. There was no electricity, no cell service, just a wood stove, an old radio, and miles of unbroken wilderness in every direction. The first night was uneventful. I made a fire, read by lantern light, and fell asleep to the sound of wind pushing through the trees. It wasn't until the second night that I noticed something was off. At first, it was just small things. My backpack was zipped open when I swore I had closed it. The lantern had been moved slightly on the table. I blamed my own forgetfulness. The woods can play tricks on you. But then, the whispers started. I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of murmuring outside the cabin. Low, indistinct, like a conversation just out of earshot. My first thought was that someone was out there, but who and why? There was no one for miles. I grabbed the rifle my uncle kept above the door and crept to the window, peering out into the swirling fog. I could see only a few feet ahead, the thick mist swallowing the trees. The whispering stopped the moment I moved the curtain. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the third day, the feeling of being watched had burrowed deep into me. I wasn't imagining it. I could feel it, the way the forest pressed in too close, the way the silence felt thick and unnatural. That evening, as I was chopping wood, I heard it again, not whispers this time, but laughter, soft, distant, childlike. My blood turned to ice. It was coming from the trees. I called out, my voice sounding too small in the empty wilderness. "Hello?" Silence. Then, a shape moved in the fog, not walking, floating. A dark, indistinct silhouette shifting between the trees. I ran inside and locked the door. That night, I kept the rifle across my lap, listening to the whispers return, circling the cabin, never getting closer, but never leaving. I should have left then, packed my bags, and walked the 12 miles back to my truck. But something about the cabin, about the fog, kept me there, like it wanted me to stay. On the 5th night, I woke up to find the front door open, wide. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. The air inside was ice cold, the fire in the stove completely out. My lantern flickered, casting jagged shadows along the wooden walls. Then, from the doorway, I heard it. A whisper. Not from outside, from right behind me. I don't remember grabbing my bag. I don't remember running. I only remember the feeling of the fog wrapping around me, thick and suffocating, as I tore through the trees, too afraid to look back. By the time I reached my truck, the sun was rising. The forest looked normal, peaceful, like nothing had happened. I never told my uncle what I saw. I didn't want him to think I'd lost my mind. But before I left, he said something that still keeps me up at night. "I noticed you left early." "Yeah," I said, "just got a bad feeling." He nodded slowly, looking past me at the tree line. "People don't usually stay more than a few nights," he murmured. "Not after they hear the voices." I never went back. I never will.